Hi, my name is Jon Kolko and I'm the founder and director of Austin Center for Design. I want to talk today about design research. Design research is a relatively new phenomenon in many companies, and a lot of companies have market research, and market research is the thing you might encounter at the mall where somebody approaches you with a clipboard and says, hey, can I ask you a couple questions, give you a gift card? Market research tries to really pinpoint people's attitudes, the way that they think about things, the way they perceive things. Design research is a little bit different. Design research attempts to understand people's behaviors, what they do. It's a subtle distinction, but it's an important one. Because generally people don't know what they do, and they're not very good at talking about their behaviors. As an aside, people typically aren't very good at talking about their attitudes with any degree of honesty either, but that's probably a topic for a different time. When a design researcher tries to understand behavior, a lot of what they do requires watching people and then interpreting what they see and trying to make sense out of it. Typically, design research falls into three different buckets, and I'll talk about them each. The first bucket is the idea of foundational design research. This is where a designer is trying to understand a unique topic, a unique discipline, or sort of a brand new area of interest. And so, a designer who's engaged on a project building printers might want to go learn everything there is to know about what it's like to use a printer. Foundational research in this context might mean embedding yourself in an office and watching people print. You might do something called contextual inquiry, which is a form of applied ethnography where users go about their lives and designers observe them, but they're not passive observers, they're active. They say things like, what are you doing? Can I try that? It looks like you did this because, is that right? They engage in conversation in a form of apprenticeship where they say, hey, I just saw you print double-sided. Can I try that? And you tell me what to do? Cool, am I doing it right? Is this how you normally do it? Let's talk about that screen that you just used. What did you think of that? During a contextual inquiry, the work that happens actually prompts what the interviewer does and says. And so rather than having a list of questions and saying, typically when you use a printer, the actual printing act causes the conversation to occur. And in this way, it's a little more real, a little less staged, and the interviewer or the facilitator can actually observe real behavior occurring. Think about the challenges of contextual inquiry. You need to be able to get into an office space, you need to be able to watch people print, and then you need to actually be able to interrupt them during their work. That's pretty easy when you're talking about printing. Imagine if you're designing an air traffic control system. A little bit harder to sit next to an air traffic controller and say, hey, what are you doing? Can I try that? What are you going to do now? Do you always do it like that? And so typically, when you're talking about more complex cases like medicine or mission-critical systems, we might use a form of retrospective account, whereby maybe a video of somebody working is used to provoke common questions or discourse. Foundational research usually happens at the beginning of a project, but it doesn't have to. It can happen throughout the entire process. There's another form of research called generative research. And again, this can happen throughout the life cycle of a project. Generative research is a certain kind of participatory design research where end users are empowered to act like designers. They're not designers, they haven't been trained, they don't know how to draw or use software or iterate through ideas. But if you give sort of, quote, regular, unquote, people some rudimentary tools, they can do some pretty amazing stuff. A tool might be a set of stickers. You might have 100 different stickers with different pictures of chairs and bunny rabbits and trees and things, and you might say, let's talk about printing. Imagine your ideal printing experience and pick out some stickers and show me the ones that describe to you that best match in your mind your ideal printing experience, and then explain why. You might at that point get sort of toward behavioral aspirations or some of the language that people use to describe their ideal printing. You might have a toolkit of user interface parts, and so you might literally have pieces of paper that have scroll bars, and another piece of paper that has a button, unlabeled button, and another that has a radio button and checkbox. And you might then build an interface with a user where they build their ideal printing interface. And again, it's going to be kind of crude and kind of gross looking, but that's okay. Later, you can do your design magic and clean it up. Generally, most generative design research methods include some form of interaction with the user sort of post-creation, where you talk about what they made and try to understand why they made it that way. The third form of design research is something called evaluative design research. And this is the notion of understanding the usability and appeal of something that's been created sort of post-production. It doesn't have to be post-launch, and in fact this can be done to evaluate a design in progress. But the most common form of evaluative design research is something called think aloud user testing. This is typically done with software, where a user will use the piece of software and a facilitator will watch them use it. And as they use it, the person will think out loud. They'll describe what they're doing as they do it. So I'm clicking, on the login button. So it just asked me what state I'm in. I'm in the state of Texas, so I type in Texas and think, okay, so now it's giving me my site key, and there's a picture of a baseball mitt, so I guess that means that it's, okay. So that's how somebody would talk out loud. It's kind of neat, when somebody talks out loud, you actually get a view into working memory. You get a view into what's going on in their brain, because they're able to describe what they're doing without actually changing what they're doing. It gets tricky because if you ask them why, you say, why did you click that? You actually disrupt that. You call into play something called a mediated process where you might actually affect the outcome of the task. And so typically a facilitator in a think aloud user session won't say anything. And if they say anything at all, it will be just to provoke people to please keep talking, which can be pretty awkward. But at the end, the design researcher has what's called a protocol, a transcript of everything that was said, which really gives you good insight into how somebody went about using a product, a system, or a service. Again, three methods, or rather three big buckets of design research. And ultimately, design research has become a pretty phenomenal field. It's helped designers at big Fortune 500 companies and in the social sector understand better their users, their wants, their needs, their desires, and ultimately their behavior.